Hello everyone, welcome to another live stitch out of the Need a Good Design and me, Brian, once again, here to show you how to stitch out a fun and useful project. Today, of course, we'll be bringing you Christmas votive bags, which was an Anita's Express that we came out with some time back. In fact, July of 2017, for those of you wondering if you already have it in your All Access catalog, July of 17, which was the year, Lauren, that we started. January of 17 is when we started, yeah. So you would have had that in All Access if you were a member back then. But if you aren't a member and you don't have Christmas votive bags already, well, after you watch this, if you decide you want to do it, you can go ahead and go to our website. You can follow the links below. We have this on sale right now through Sunday for only $20. So that's a $10 off, and you have this whole tutorial that we'll be doing to help you walk right through it. So how is everyone doing today? Feel free to shout out any comments, questions, etc. in the chat, not only for your fellow peers, but Lauren will be on the other end monitoring the comments as well as we go along. So we will be doing some prizes here in just a few, but I'm going to go ahead and get this kind of set up and going. And if you join this later on, remember, once it's done, it will be on our YouTube page. You can go back and watch it at any time. So first and foremost, hopping into what we're going to be doing today is creating this votive bag. Not this particular one. I'll tell you the design file we're going to be doing in the hoop here today, in case you want to do the exact one I'm doing. But this is basically what it is. We've done these before. I did a tutorial back in the fall for a fall one. Oh, it was a Halloween one that I did. And they're a lot of fun. And it's a really quick project to do. And we even have the tutorial linked down below that shows you how to sew these together and finish them up. Make them all nice and pretty so you can pop a battery-operated candle in there and light up your Christmas experience. Or winter holiday experience, because it's all winter themed. So the Christmas votive bags, we are going to be doing design AE-CVB-4. So basically, design number 4. If you look at the very last number, it's going to be the round ornament on the red background for a picture reference, just to show you. Now, when you get into this tutorial, you want to take note of a few things. One is, of course, finding the file you want to do. Then you're going to reference your materials list that is also in your tutorial. Make sure you have everything you need. At that point in time, we're going to get prepped with our machine. Get the stabilizer that was recommended, which in this case is going to be a no-show mesh. It's just a lightweight cutaway stabilizer. We love to use it basically anytime something's going to have a seam. It holds items that you sew together really well so they don't pull apart. So it's a great foundation to have for anything you sew together. But we'll hoop our no-show mesh. We'll get that prepped. We're going to pull our number steps out. Make sure that we're following those either on a tablet. You can print it like we have, whatever you prefer. And of course, we want to make sure we're following our picture steps at the same time. So if you're fine with flipping back and forth between them, not a problem, but I want to make sure that you're always paying attention to those number steps first and then referencing the picture for anything that you may have questions on, because that's all the pictures are for. So I've gone ahead and loaded my design. I've hooped my stabilizer. I'm looking at the picture steps. Step A is telling me to go ahead and hoop that no-show mesh. And then we'll do a squaring stitch. So before we get into all this, how about some prizes now that we've kind of been on live for a few? So we will send you a $20 gift card for typing the following in chat. We'll let it settle for a moment. Everybody gets their word in, and then Lauren will pick for the winner. We'll be giving away several of these. It will be a digital gift card sent to your email. But the word I want you to use is Christmas. Just type Christmas in the actual chat, and we'll pick that winner here in just a few. So while you guys are typing that, one thing I want to point out today is that what we're going to be doing to create this is just 3 of our most basic techniques. So we're basically just creating a quilt block with some applique. We're just slightly manipulating how we're going to create the end aesthetic look, which will be a clear picture window for the candle to shine through on these quilt blocks that we sewed together to create a nice little bag. So the materials list that we're going to be using here in class is I'm just going to be making one side of it, and then you're going to have the link down below to go back and watch how to sew it together once you make the other side. But we'll have, of course, our no-show mesh, which I have hooped, 2 pieces of batting. You're going to have fabric for both sides, which Lauren picked this fabric she is in love with, which is Santa, bunch of cookies, and some ho-ho-ho. If you're wondering where we got the fabric, major purveyor, good luck. You know how fabric is. But you can certainly try to search for it or check with your dealers. We are also going to have some organza, clear vinyl, and then the thread of choice, namely based on the color of fabric you picked. So now that we got the materials out of the way, what I want to point out is those basic steps we're going to be doing is creating the quilt block, doing some basic appliques. So we're going to start with our squaring stitch. And I'll go ahead and get that running and explain that. Actually, you know what? Let me do that in a dark thread so everyone can see. But our squaring stitch is going to be the first stitch for any quilt block. We have our winner. Yeah. Well, before I continue that education, let's announce that winner, Lauren.
It's Dawn Tennyson.
Dawn Tennyson, you are the winner. Congratulations. If you shoot us an email to customerexperience@anita-gooddesign.com, which we'll have that posted right there that you can see on the screen, they'll send you that $20 gift card. So congratulations, Dawn. All right. But as I was saying, the squaring stitch is the first step to any quilt block. Now, we don't just use our quilt blocks to make quilts. We use them for a variety of different things because our quilt blocks are a foundational pattern for a lot of different projects we do. So it's a lot of fun to be able to not have to quilt with quilt blocks. You can use them in a lot of things. So to get started here, and I'll go back over the squaring stitch, I'm running the very first step. So I've read the picture, step A, that's told me and shown me how it wants me to hoop the stabilizer and run that first stitch. I've also looked at my number steps. Remember, we're using these two for that design that ends in a number 4. And step 1 was the placement stitch, place batting after this step. So this technically is our squaring stitch, which again is our first stitch for any quilt block. Let me get this up. All right. So we've run that first step there, which is literally just going to show us where to put our batting. Makes everything very handy. Our quilting system means you only need to hoop the actual stabilizer and let the placement stitches tell you how much batting you need to prep, because we quilt each block as we go, how much fabric you need, so that you don't have to hoop a whole piece. So it actually makes things a lot easier than traditional methods. And sorry while I'm messing with this threader here. See if third time's a charm. There we go. All right. So we've run our squaring stitch now. While this is tacking down, I'll explain why the squaring stitch is important, but we'll move on to the next step, which is putting down our batting. So the picture step is telling me how to cover the actual placement stitch in step B of the pictures. Step 2 of our number steps is just telling me to place the batting and tack it down. So we'll go ahead and put that down. Give it a good little tack. Oops, there we go. So with the squaring stitch being the very first step for all of our quilt blocks, that basically means, and the reason we call it a squaring stitch is because no other stitching will happen outside of that first stitch. And that's an important thing to know because at Anita Good Design, we have a few rules that everybody who's a part of the production process knows that helps us not only keep things simple, but allows us to create all the designs you see every month. With our squaring stitch, that tells any of us on a floor, nothing is going to be stitched outside of there. Any fabric that tacks down to the squaring stitch will be left in a seam allowance. So that's the important thing to know about a squaring stitch, is anything that it touches it needs to extend into the seam allowance, meaning we want extra fabric in there, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a few. So we've run step 2 of our batting, and we're going to go ahead and pull this guy out, and I'll trim a little bit, and then I'll hold it in front of the camera and show you exactly how I'm trimming. But also when we're doing quilt blocks, As I mentioned, we add our batting in as we go. That way we can quilt the top of our quilt blocks as we're building them in the quilt. And then later on, if you're not familiar with our quilting process, well, you're on YouTube, go to our page, subscribe, click the notification bell too so that you know whenever we release a new video, but you'll be able to search for finishing your quilt block right there, and you'll be able to watch the whole video and see how we do it if you are a traditional quilter. So as I've been trimming this, let me see if that's showing there. So you can see how close I'm getting to it. And one thing I want to point out is that, let's see, yeah. So you can see the original squaring stitch in black on the outside. You'll notice the batting, the tack down for it, is slightly inset. So there's almost an 1/8 inch channel in between the tack down for my batting and the original squaring stitch. Now, why am I pointing that out? Well, that inset tack down makes it easy so that when we trim our batting, because we don't want batting in our seam allowance, it makes it hard to sew things together later. But batting's hard to cut really close because it's springy. So it helps it keep out of the seam allowance. But later on, when we actually go to sew blocks together, it creates a channel. So when I put two blocks together, I'm straight stitching right in between, which you can see from the back side. And I'll hold that there too. When I sew my quilt blocks together and I match up my two blocks right sides, I don't have to use a wax pen or anything else to mark where I need a straight stitch. I stitch directly between the squaring stitch and the tack down for the batting. Also a good reason why, if you're brand new, doing it in a contrasting color is helpful later on. So next we're going to go ahead and view step 3 here. We're all trimmed up. Step 2, I'm going to go back and read it. Said tacking stitch, then place base fabric after this step. So it's a good thing to know that I often, when I first started here, had to get in the habit of going back and rereading a previous step before I moved on to make sure that I wasn't actually missing something I was supposed to do after the stitching. So I can also view in our picture steps, step D, it's saying go ahead and tack down the base fabric. When placing it, be sure to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance on all sides. So this is where our base fabric is going to get tacked down to the squaring stitch, basically. So that means it's now a part of the seam allowance. And therefore, we need to make sure when we measure that squaring stitch to prep our fabric, we give ourselves enough room to place that on top and ensure that we do have enough seam allowance to properly sew the blocks together. So I placed my base fabric right side up, made sure I had a 1/2 inch seam allowance on all sides, and we're going to go ahead and tack that down. Now, this step, as I mentioned before, is where I'm going to reiterate, and you won't really see it with this particular design. This particular design has one single base fabric, but you might get into some designs where we're creating a paper piece look as the quilt base, like we're doing a flying geese pattern, using our method of paper piecing in the hoop that we call folded fabric. In that case, you don't have a single piece of base fabric. So you're having to leave pieces in the seam allowance as you build those pieces. But for this, it's very easy. So if you're new and you're not familiar with any of those type of traditional techniques that we've adapted for our software, just start with the very basics. If it touches your squaring stitch, when it tacks down, you leave the excess in that seam allowance. All right, we've gone ahead and tacked down the base fabric. I do know that step 4 is step 4 is the trimming stitch. So trim interior fabric after this step and place vinyl. I'll go over what we're doing with that here in just a moment after I get this step running. So right now, this next stitch is basically being used as a marking stitch. So it's showing us where to remove fabric out of the center of the quilt block so that we can create the window with the vinyl. Now I'll show you how we're going to cut this out, because we don't want to just cut straight through and cut out the stabilizer too. In fact, the way we designed this when we first prototyped it years ago was that we're going to actually end up using the vinyl as a replacement for the stabilizer once you remove it. But that's a couple steps ahead. So we've gone ahead and done our marking stitch on here. I'm going to go ahead and switch my thread after this as well for stippling. But got our marking stitch, which may be a little hard to see. I didn't contrast the thread, but it's right there in the middle for that circular, round Christmas ornament. I was struggling to remember the word ornament. So what I do with this part, and if you're new, this is where getting a seam ripper is going to be very handy, because you only want to cut through the top layer of fabric, and I'll hold it to the camera once I get a little bit done, and the batting. Now you can do the top layer first and then the batting, but after you've done this a while and making sure you're not cutting all the way through yet and taking out that stabilizer, this will be pretty simple. You'll feel the difference in weight of just having the fabric and batting versus, oh, I'm accidentally cutting through the stabilizer. But for now, you just get a little peek hole made with your actual seam ripper. Get in with your scissors. But I've cut quite a few of these, so I can tell the difference just on the scissors themselves. And now that I've got this halfway cut, I'm going to show you in the picture exactly how we're cutting it. So you can see here that I'm just removing the fabric inside that actual tack down stitch. But I have not cut through the stabilizer. I cut out the batting and the fabric in the same go, but like I said, feel free, if you're a little more cautious and new, to just do one layer at a time to make sure you don't puncture through. What if you do puncture through your actual stabilizer or cut it out and forget? Is it a big deal? Nope. We're going to be removing it soon anyway. So all you need to do, and it's actually mentioned in picture step E, which is basically what we're doing right now, which is removing that inside fabric. It says in that common mistake in the picture step, accidentally cut through your stabilizer, no big deal basically. Just take another piece, some spray adhesive, and patch it on the back until we're ready to remove it. So that'll just keep it stable. For those of you wondering what we're talking about, the actual stabilizer, you never want to stitch with part of it missing, because then structurally it is not fully taut, meaning things can draw and pucker, and in some instances there's not even something to stitch on. So we always want to have a base layer of stabilizer or something to replace it. And something to replace it is basically what we're going to be doing here in just a few with the vinyl. So let's check our picture steps and number steps now that we have all of that cut out. So step F is saying, in the picture steps, is saying once it's trimmed it should look like this. Good enough. Now in picture step G, it's saying we'll now layer our vinyl. Make sure to completely cover the stitches of the main element design. Now looking at my machine, I can see I'm on step 5 of 6, which, let's see here, trim interior fabric. After this step, and place vinyl. So just rereading step 4, I know that I need to place my vinyl now. And then step 5 is going to be the actual tacking stitch. And then we'll trim the organza after that. And I'm just going to back that up here. All right. So tacking stitch for the vinyl. Let's see, trim vinyl and then place organza. Okay. Sometimes I get really ahead of myself. Lauren knows this. And I'll start doing things without thinking about it. So I have to stop and actually make sure I read the directions a lot. Because when I first started here, I was the person who would read one word, assume what he knew was supposed to be done, and then mess up everything after hours of work. So you make those mistakes a few times, but you eventually learn, especially after writing the tutorials for a couple years, to actually read all the words, go back, reread until you really get used to these techniques. So what technique are we doing now? Well, we already did the technique of building our quilt block base. That does not change no matter what the quilt block is. The first steps will always be that squaring stitch, tack down for your batting. Anything that happens after that is essentially just appliquing or folded fabric or embroidery. Those are the only things you're ever really doing out of Need a Good Design. So right now we're actually appliquing. Sure, it's a modification of applique because we removed the fabric from behind. We're using vinyl, not fabric. But all we did, we had a placement stitch, which was basically that marking stitch where to remove the fabric. We put our vinyl down and tacked it. That's literally applique. Because at this point, we're going to go ahead and take it out after running step 5. And we're going to go ahead and trim the vinyl and put our organza down. So I'm going to go in here and just cut all that excess vinyl away from the top. The vinyl is a non-woven material, obviously, so be careful with your scissors. I'm using curved tip applique scissors because the tip curving like this, when I'm working with delicate materials or non-woven materials that can catch and really rip, stuff that you can't iron back shut, then the curved tip will keep you from cutting back into the design when you're trying to remove the material around the tack down stitch. So basic applique, we just trim all the excess from the outside now. And that's literally how all the applique is done. It's a placement stitch. You put whatever material it is you're using right side up, tack it, trim the excess according to the type of applique you're doing. So there are different types, but the technique doesn't change. It's just applique. All right, so I've trimmed up that vinyl. Glancing back, I know that before I move on to step 6, to tack this organza, I got to put it down. So I'm just going to trim a little bit. The number of layers of organza you wish to use, or netting, tulle, whatever kind of sheer material you want to use, is the number of layers, rather, is just going to be based on how much of a shadow effect you want to cast with it. So once we put down our organza, not all organza is going to stick, or sit flat, rather. So I like to just tape it so it's taut. That way the presser foot doesn't move it around while we're actually stitching. Okay, get all that taped into place. Check, I know that on step 6, which is the tacking stitch, checking my picture steps, I can see we're basically on step I and J right now. So we'll go ahead and run that tack down. All right. Now that tack down's going, and I'm going to get to more questions and things here in just a moment once it gets on its embroidery runs for stippling, and we'll do more prizes at that point. But just to give the educational part, again, this is just applique. I'm just repeating that same step. So even though I did an applique like the clear vinyl, I'm just literally using those placement stitches, marking stitches, whatever, as the actual area in which to place the vinyl. So again, it's placement stitch, put the vinyl down, placement stitch, put the actual organza down. But we don't always keep running placement stitches if they're going on top of the same spot. Therefore, it's not important for me to rerun a placement stitch when I know I'm just covering the same area I did with the vinyl, but still just appliquing. We've run the tack down for that organza. Again, same thing here. Organza catches really easy on straight tip scissors, so curved tip scissors, snips, whatever you prefer, are a great way to go. So I know how to trim my organza because I'm also following my picture steps with the picture references on how things should look as you're going. So that's why I always say make sure that you're using your number steps to be on track according to what your machine is about to do. But the picture steps are really handy for new people who aren't familiar with our definitions or how close we may want you to trim, etc. All right, so I've got all that trimmed up basically. So I'm going to put this back in here. I'm just going to double check everything. I can see now that picture step J was telling me to trim the organza. You can leave an 1/8 inch sticking out. There's a reason for that. It's because organza is very sheer. It draws easily. Therefore, having a little bit extra outside is just going to help it not pull in while it does these stitches. But picture step K is now showing us we're ready to remove that no-show mesh from the back. Why are we ready to remove it? Because our vinyl is now going to act as the stabilizer. You see, we've removed top material, put new material down. Now we can remove this cutaway from the back on the inside, but we still have material in there to stitch on. That's the step process we're doing to create this window. So I'm just going to carefully get in with the tip of my scissor. Again, I'd recommend using a seam ripper if you're new to this. That way you don't puncture all the way through it. But you're just removing from the back of the hoop that no-show mesh that is inside the tack down stitch, or whatever kind of cutaway you're using. At Anita Good Design, we only recommend one type of stabilizer per category, meaning for cutaway, we're just like, if you get no-show mesh, you're not going to need any other type of cutaway for any project that we do, very rarely. I really can't think of anything we've done in the past 6-7 years that has said to use a heavier weight cutaway. We just aren't really doing that. That would be up to you because you're going to know what material you're putting it on. Like if you're doing it on a hat, you're going to use a different weight tearaway. But no-show mesh is all you really need. But if you have a favorite and you're a veteran, use it. All right, actually let me show you guys a little up close. So now that I've removed from the back side, you can see all the way through, but you can tell that I have that vinyl there, which will now act as a material for us to stitch on in lieu of the stabilizer. All right, so checking the next step here in our number steps. We are on step 7, which is the echo stitch. So this is our quilting stitch, essentially, that we're using here. It says red, just match your thread color to whatever fabric you're using. If you have a print like I do that has a variety of colors, just something tonal that just fits in. You can see more about how we pick colors in the About Us on any design you buy. Just open it up, scroll towards the bottom. I can also see in here that I've done the picture step, K. L showing me how it should look, which I showed you guys on the camera there. And then M is basically saying go through the rest of your embroidery steps. That's all we're doing at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and start this stippling. And we'll give away some more prizes while this is going, and I'll give you some other education. But for the next word, for a $20 gift card that you need to type in the chat right now, is going to be votive. I get very creative here. If you type in votive in the chat, we'll pick a winner here in just a moment for a $20 gift card to use for any digital product on our website. All right.
Brian, can you remind us that this is the last live stitch out of 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. So a few reminders and specials that we have going on right now. One, this is the last live stitch out of 2021, so we'll see you again next year, to use that old fun saying. But again, this votive bag, if you like what you're seeing here and you want to do it, then it's only going to be $20 through Sunday. So right now that special is down from $30 originally all the way down to $20. That'll be good through Sunday for these Christmas votive bags. We have the links posted down below for you. We also have a flash sale. What is the flash sale? Well, that is going to be our free standing lace snowflakes, which I don't have an example of in front of me, but if you're very curious about it and you want to see it, click on the link below, because that is 50% off through Sunday as well for our freestanding lace snowflakes. And those are half off as a mini, so you'll get them super cheap. Click on the link to check it out, see the pictures, you're going to like it, you're going to want to put it in your cart and get it while the special is going. Those are very simple and fun to do because you're just hooping 1 or 2 layers of water-soluble stabilizer and putting in a thread and press and go. Rinsing it away and you have ornaments ready on the go. You can do tons of them. They make great gifts, especially if you're like me and you are a Christmas Eve shopper. Then this is definitely a procrastination gift because they'll be done in minutes and they're easy to assemble. Finally, just as a reminder, also you might know that we're doing our 12 days of Christmas every day at 10:30 Eastern time. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be giving away prizes. We'll of course be telling you what our current daily special is every single day through our 12 days of Christmas. And that's, again, every single day. Watch out for it, 10:30 a.m. So while this is going through the actual stitching, Lauren, you got that prize winner? Awesome.
It's Sonia Coopert.
And the winner is Sonia Coopert. Congratulations, you've won a $20 digital gift card that you can use for even that flash sale if you want to. So go ahead and shoot us an email to the one on the screen there, customer experience at anita-gooddesign.com. Let us know you won. We'll get that right over to you. So while this is going through and doing these echo stitching, let me explain what that is really. If you're not really a quilter, echo stitching is just a type of quilting stitch, kind of like stippling is, or free motion, whatever. It's just running stitch designs on the base of the quilt block. This type of running stitch design or quilting stitch is traditionally found in Hawaiian quilts, where it replicates with those running stitches a ripple that takes the shape of the center design element. In this case would be the round ball ornament, essentially. So it's just one type that we like to do. But what I do want to reiterate is that we're doing this votive bag, but again, what you learned today in this class and what you're learning right now are three of our biggest types of techniques. Making a quilt block, you just learned how to do that. Applique, and then just basic embroidery, changing the thread in your machine, which if you're here, you're either familiar with or you want to be. So I'd recommend contacting your dealer about using the machine if they have any classes available, etc. All right, so we've run our embroidery step for the echo quilt stitching. And let's see, what color do I want this to be? We'll do red for the final step. Get that hooked in. Now, you can always just view on your actual screen of the machine the step you're on so that you know, but I don't know how that happened. But the last two steps that we have for this is just the embroidery run. So on the picture steps, you'd be able to see, excuse me, rather the number steps, you'd be able to see that the last two steps, steps 7 and 8, had numbers, then gave you a color, and told you what stitching it was going to do. The numbers are just the thread color we used, which I know those are Floriani color numbers, but it's kind of irrelevant because you're going to be picking your thread colors based on the fabric you choose. And let me say that again because you know that we create a ton of stuff here every single month, and so we obviously have to get pretty adept at picking colors quickly. So how do we do that? Well, we always buy our fabric first. Why? Because you can always just take that fabric, go up to an actual thread rack, and then pick whatever colors match. You may have a variety of different threads at your disposal, but it's way easier to do that than it is to take your threads to a fabric shop and spend all day walking up and down aisles trying to find fabric to match. You essentially want to pick your fabric first, walk up to a small rack, and then coordinate threads with that. So don't get hung up on the exact colors we use for more interpretive designs like this. It's really only if you're doing something like a tile scene that's very exact or things like that where the colors will matter more, so to speak. So I'm running the final step in this, which is step 8, doing our satin stitching to finish this all up. When you're creating this votive bag, you just need to literally do what we're doing right now twice. That way you'll have two sides. The video link below is going to show you how to sew it all together. And how about we do one final prize while we're wrapping this up? The final word of the day is going to be candle. Type candle into the actual chat. We'll give away one more $20 gift card for this class. But if you've been doing this quite some time, and I talked to Lauren about this the other day, but there's only a few things you really need to know with Anita Good Design. We have a lot of different fundamental techniques, but all those are built on essentially 4 main techniques. And once you know those, you know how to do everything that we do. And that's basically just quilt block, applique, embroidery. We just did all 3 of those things. They're just done with different looks with whatever other designs and collections we're doing. That applique may be a confetti applique or one that has a window, but it's still just the same step for the applique. The only other big technique that we didn't do in this particular one is folded fabric, which is our way of mimicking traditional hand or paper piecing in the hoop. I've been bringing that up more because if you are new, you can get really overwhelmed with all the different things that we're trying to imitate from traditional embroidery and quilting, but we're really only imitating those with a core set of actual techniques. Quilt block, applique, folded fabric, embroidery. That's it. Everything else is built on top of that. So that's all you need to start with, all you need to learn. Everything else will start to come together down the road. So do these classes, stitch them out for the first time on scrap fabric if you're new, just to test it out, make sure you got the hang of it. Then use your favorite fabrics. So will you make the machine camera full screen for me? Thank you. Now that this has kind of started stitching a bit more, you can see that it's actually going right over the vinyl and the organza. Now we can do this dense of a satin stitch on the vinyl because we have that organza on top, but you have to keep in mind vinyl is a non-woven material. Therefore, if you use it in designs that weren't created for the vinyl, you risk perforating it because the density could be so high that your needles marks are so close together that it's literally just cutting that material. So there's ways to get around it, like on cardstock, we'll use a base fabric on there and then do dense stitching. On this particular one, we have the organza sitting on top of that vinyl, so it adds a little bit of weave for it to hold on to. But there's ways to work around and use really fun materials like vinyl, like mylar, like cork, etc. But it does need to have digitizing or techniques made for it.
We have our winner.
Excellent. Who's that winner?
Melinda.
Melinda. Mel. No D? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Melinda Mel, congratulations, you're the winner. Go ahead and shoot us that email to customerexperience@anita-gooddesign.com. Right there on the screen. Let us know you won and we'll send you that $20 gift card. Just so you know, our gift cards never expire and can be used in conjunction with coupon codes and current specials, right? Lauren, that hasn't changed? Yes, Lauren?
Can you let me know the gauge of the vinyl?
Yeah. So we had a question on the gauge of the vinyl. Lauren just put up to me. Very good question. We use a medium weight vinyl, no thicker than an 8 gauge. No, thinner than an 8 gauge. Yeah, thinner. Yeah, any thinner than an 8 gauge. And people have it shred on them. I haven't ever used one that thin. They prototyped this a long time ago using vinyl. But I know I'm talking to customers when they have issues. I'm like, what gauge are you using? If it's less than 8, they typically will have problems with it not holding up, really perforating and falling out. So a minimum of that 8 gauge is what I recommend. Can even just go over to my grandma's house and take the vinyl off the couch. Use that. That'll hold up just fine. All right, so coming around to finishing up this project, again, with our YouTube channel, and I really want you guys to, for those of you who haven't really searched it, or maybe this is your first time really on our YouTube channel, make sure you like. The more you guys like and comment, the more that YouTube's basically computer puts us out there to more people so that they can find us. So that's very helpful for us, so we do thank you when you do that. But if you're just here for the education, you don't care about any of that stuff, or both, everything that we do, we basically make tutorials for. They're free for you to watch here on our YouTube channel. Education is huge for us here because we want you to know how to do all the different things that we're creating for you to do, and all the stuff we've made back since 2004 when Steve started this company. So take advantage of our YouTube page. Hit the actual subscribe button if you haven't already. Once you do, you'll see a bell icon pop up. If you click that bell icon, then it will notify you, depending on whatever email you put in or phone number, whenever there is a new video that we're releasing. You'll get access to all that, those notifications. But you'll see there's videos going back 8, 9 years on this channel, and they've really started to revamp it to add even more content for it. So we're hoping you're enjoying that as well. All right, coming up here to finish the last couple stitches for one side of our votive bag. And again, that link below is going to show you the tutorial. Did Brooke do that one? Yeah. Yeah, with our educator Brooke, she's going to show you how to basically do another, well, you're going to do the other block the way I showed you, but how to combine these together and so on. All right. Now that we have finished our quilt block, and I'll hold that just so you can see in the front. You see we got that nice window in there, the organza. Again, you can layer more layers of organza if you want to, depending on how much light you want to come through or disperse you want it to be. But that's all there is to it. You'll just follow the picture steps to take this out. Make sure you trim to a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which is basically what it's showing you in steps M, N, and then O is saying go ahead and do that all over again to get the other side. And then again, click that link below. Remember this, you'll be able to go back and watch. So if you did something else and I'm way ahead of you, that's quite all right. You can pause this, go back, rewatch it as many times as you want. Even if you decide that you want to take advantage of the $20 votive or Christmas votive bag by Anita's Express, linked below, which expires Sunday, and then want to do this, you can. So you can go ahead and load it up, get that in your shopping cart while it's on special. Watch this video anytime down the road when you decide to do it. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, really, on votive bags, and we'll see you for the next live stitch out next